Hi, this is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast, where it's all about living your life as a global citizen. As part of living your life as a global citizen, which I've mentioned before in my podcast, we are great believers in being able to understand other countries and cultures and places you may visit, or maybe you may never visit them. Maybe you have some friends or neighbors or others who come from a certain country or culture, and you just want to be able to understand more. The world is such a wonderful place, and it is filled with so many different cultures and people. One of the things we want to talk about today is we want to talk about the Philippines, and specifically the 1987 Philippine Constitution. The Philippine 1980 Constitution came into power when President Aquino came into power in the Philippines. This was basically, she essentially restored the Filipino 1935 Constitution and, passed several new constitutions. So this is a relatively new constitution for the Philippines because it only happened in 1987. Basically what it did, it set the Philippines to have a constitution which was very similar to the United States Constitution. And this, I think, is very important and essential to understand that in 1987, the Philippines basically began to model themselves after the United States, where basically there were three branches of government: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch of government. So basically there are now in the Philippines, there are three different branches of government. These three branches in the Philippines are based very much upon the U.S. Constitution. Each of the branches shares equal power and all have limited control, or they all have different limited power. The limits of power were instituted as a safeguard against abusing martial law. And if anyone knows anything about the Philippine history, you know that during the time of Marco, there was a lot of abuse of power. I remember, living in Hong Kong and seeing this vast, huge, yacht out on the ocean there. And I remember a friend of mine saying to me that, oh, that's Marcos's wife's boat. And she was very famous for all the shoes that she had, of course. And we used to always laugh and joke about, oh, we wonder how many of her shoes are on that boat. But I remember that, that boat was harbored out there, anchored out there for a long time in the Hong Kong harbor. Inside the Philippines 1987 Constitution, there's several things that basically talk about the Philippines and why this is such an important constitution for the Philippine people. Basically, just to give some of the highlights, is there's a Bill of Rights that talks about protecting the people against abuse of power by the state. This Bill of Rights is very similar to many of the provisions which is in the U.S. Constitution. So it basically is to be able to protect the Filipino people against the abuse of power. This, of course, is very, important for most Filipinos because, during some of their political upheavals, there was some great abuse of power where their rights were not protected. It also defines who's a citizen of the Philippines and how a person can become a Filipino citizen. It talks about who can vote and how they can vote and things as, local government and public office and the national economy. It, talks about social justice and human rights, education, science, technology, arts, and culture and sports. And the family. It recognizes the family unit as a basic foundation of the nation and gives protection for and within the family unit. This is actually a very interesting constitution, as it is very similar to the U.S. Constitution. It's essentially giving the Filipino people many rights that we would maybe see now in a place like the United States. So the Philippines is an archipelago with over 7,000 islands. So it's not just renowned for its breathtaking landscape, rich culture, and its, warm-hearted people, but also a unique and fascinating legal system. So here are, 10 different facts about the legal system of the Philippines, which is, probably good for you to understand that if you're ever going to go there to visit, if you're going to travel there, just so you understand a little bit more about the Filipino legal system. The Philippines was named after in honor of the King Philip III of Spain during the Spanish colonial era. The archipelago was previously known by various names, but then it, originally became known after King Philip of Spain and became known as the Philippines. There's, basically three branches of government, which we talked about before: executive, legislative, and judiciary. There's three separate branches, which are in the Philippines. It has a legislative system where the Congress convenes, or what's translated also to be the National Assembly. The Philippines follows the civil law tradition due to the Spanish colonial heritage, but has incorporated features of the common law system from American colonization, especially in its procedural laws. So it's kind of a mix between these. The national language, while the Filipino is the national language, both Filipino and English are official languages, so notably legal proceedings and legislation is primarily conducted in English. Unlike many countries, the Philippines does not have divorce for its Catholic populace. So this is really quite interesting in that if you ever meet a Filipino and they might say, oh, it's been very difficult for me to get divorced, and you might think, oh, well, that can't be true. Well, no, it really actually could be quite true. Instead, they have an annulment, is a legal recourse for couples seeking to dissolve their marriage. This means the marriage is declared null and void from the beginning as if it never existed. So, this could be a problem, for some Filipinos. That's why you maybe don't see divorce as much, especially if they have children and other things. This is what kind of makes Philippine law or marriage law quite unique compared to other places, is the fact that they do not have divorce. The Philippines has some of the world's largest Christmas season. Christmas is a huge time in the Philippines. There's a lot of celebrations going on, and sometimes people can start as early as September in some places, but definitely, throughout the month of December, there's a lot of things going on about Christmas celebrations. The Philippines has had a kind of, unsettled relationship with the death penalty. It's been abolished, reinstated. And as of January 2022, the Philippines remains a country without capital punishment. Part of it is because, maybe it's been abused in the past. So if you're planning to travel to the Philippines, which I highly recommend, it is a beautiful country. The islands are beautiful there. The people are friendly. It's a great place. It's just good for you to understand a little bit about the legal system, about the Constitution, about the different branches of government, and to understand some of the laws so that you understand exactly when you're being told something, when somebody says that they could not get a divorce, that could absolutely be true. And there could be many reasons for that. This is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast, where it's all about living your life as a global citizen. We'd like to thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. We'd love to have you recommend it to others. Thank you so much for being part of our community. And we'd like to thank those who helped put this together, especially Rico, who helps put the podcast together and ensures that it gets out there and that it technically the way it's supposed to. And we'd like to thank you for continuing to live your life as a global citizen.